Hey everybody, it's Party Leech here with another episode of Total Breakdown. Today we're going to see the Bretonnians of Kark take to the field against the Lizardmen of Zeblasky. We begin of course with talk of composition and deployment, and while the Bretonnians come here wide and large, the Lizardmen actually come in with a rather compact elite army. First things first, we have Alberic de Bordelot in charge of the Bretonnian forces. Up front, we've got these 5 units of peasant mob, and right behind them we have these 3 units of peasant bowmen. Behind them, we have 3 units of foot squires, and back here in the middle you can see as well we've got the beast slayers of Baston. They are anti-large and armor-piercing, the foot squire regiment of renown. Alongside this entire infantry contingent, we do have a paladin on foot as well, and that's a good call. The paladin is anti-large, and you don't want him to be on horseback or up in the air, because then you present a large target for potential carnosaurs on the other side of the field, whether it's Krokgar on a carnosaur, or it's Sword of Scar veterans, or perhaps even just a feral carnosaur. The paladin would be a lot of trouble being thrown into melee against those anti-large units, so this is a good call, keeping him on foot, while back here we have the Damsel of Life on horseback, and that's a good call as well because she's not going to be thrown into melee, so she will maintain her distance from those potential threats on the battlefield. Meanwhile, at the same time back here, you can see we've got these 3 units of questing knights, and we also have this 4th unit, the Regiment of Renown, the Companions of Genel. Meanwhile, the Lizardmen over here are being led by none other than Lord Mazdamundi himself. Up front, you can see on either flank we have a unit of skink cohorts, and in the center we've got 3 units of Saurus warriors with shields. Right in the middle as well, we have the Bastiladon with Revivification Crystal, and then on either flank we have the Saurus Scar veterans atop their Carnosaurs, making them anti-large and armor-piercing. Back here, meanwhile, these Temple Guard do surround Lord Mazdamundi, while back here we have the Cold One Spear Riders, also anti-large and armor-piercing, hoping to dive in and intercept enemy cavalry, I think, whenever the opportunity presents itself. Both sides playing rather aggressively. Let's take a look at how it all breaks down as these peasant bowmen begin the aggression by firing away at the Saurus Scar veteran to the left flank over here, but you can see the Saurus Scar veteran more or less immediately decides to pull back into safety, and that is not a bad call whatsoever. And at the same time, over here to the side, we've got this Saurus Scar veteran trying to dive in towards the peasant mob over here, while in the middle as well you can see the Bastiladon with Revivification Crystal going to have an absolute field day, throwing these peasants back over here and doing a lot of damage specifically to morale over here. Those peasant mob are not going to want to stick around and fight for very long, especially with those Saurus warriors with shields diving in as well. And Alberic de Bordelot looking for an opportunity to get involved. Of course, he does not want to dive into Lord Mazdamundi right now because he's surrounded by Temple Guards, but he has to find a way to get involved quickly. While over here on the left flank, you can see the peasant mob are diving into the skink cohort here, doubling down on the skink cohort, while we also have the questing knights pushing in, and these foot squires as well on that left flank. While on the right flank, we have the peasant mob over here diving in to try and provide some support, as the Saurus Scar veteran is getting a fair bit of damage done to the peasant mob alongside the skink cohort over here. Meanwhile, in the center, we have Alberic diving in with that beautiful rear charge right through these Saurus warriors with their shields, getting a fair bit of damage done there, but I think more importantly chasing after the Bastiladon with Revivification Crystal, trying to get rid of that healing capability as quickly as possible. While back here now as well, we've got the questing knights trying to strike down these Saurus warriors with shields who are a little late to this party, trying to push through that gap, I think, and doing a touch of damage, tossing these guys back, but you can see the Saurus Scar veteran over here is immediately going to push in again atop that Carnosaur, anti-large and armor-piercing. The questing knights are going to have a terrible time, but they are not the only unit that's going to have a terrible time. Immediately you can see we have Alberic de Bordelot does get hit by the net of a Mintok. Beautifully done over here. He gets trapped in place, and we have the Temple Guards diving in. We've got Mazdamundi diving in. We've got 2 units of Saurus Scar veteran diving in and causing a tremendous amount of damage despite all the support coming through from the foot squires as well as these questing knights. Alberic finds himself in a terrible position. He does use heroic killing blow to try and get more damage output going on as he's surrounded by all of these high tier units, and at the same time you will see we get regrowth upgraded atop Alberic as well, and that's going to help a lot, giving him the plus 44% physical resistance, and it'll also try to replenish his hit points that are dropping extremely quickly. So good calls over there. Meanwhile, as that's happening in the center there, as the Bretonnians are falling apart in the center there, you can see the left flank is going in their favor as the skink cohort is falling apart, and the right flank as well very quickly sort of beginning to lose health, beginning to get overwhelmed by all of these foot squires and these peasant mobs as well. We also have these Companions of Genel now looking for an opportunity to dive in with his flanking maneuver, maybe pushing in towards the center, while all of these peasant mob are firing away at the Bastiladon with Revivification Crystal, who is using Apotheosis from Mazdamundi to try and stay alive and also maybe cause some fear in this massive clump. And with massive clumps comes the opportunity to use a Vortex spell, and Lord Mazdamundi doing exactly that. Take a look at this, not 1-2 punch, but 1-2-3 punch. So first off, we get the Shield of the Old Ones, helping protect friendlies from all that magical damage coming through banishment, and at the same time we also get the Ruination of Cities atop that banishment, going in random directions, but right in the center of this massive clump, it is going to damage a lot of enemy units, and you can see these foot squires absolutely falling apart. We've got these questing knights giving up on the fight more or less instantaneously. Some of these companions of Kinel going to take a touch of damage as well from that little strand of the ruination of cities. We've got these questing knights giving up on the fight. Alberic again trying to pull away into safety because this is a trouble scenario right now for him. The Saurus Scar veteran chasing after Alberic, of course, who is trying to, again, take to that air, but that center has fallen apart more or less instantaneously for Bretonnia. They are all giving up on the fight. Terror is kicking in. A lot of these knights as well, very low on health now. That has gone terribly for Bretonnia, while this left flank, as you can see, they have overwhelmed the skink cohort and are now pushing in for some rear charges. Alberic does manage to get more or less back to full health over here. Very nicely done, using that upgraded regrowth beautifully there. Meanwhile, back here you can see the Bastildon does use Apotheosis once more, trying to stay alive, trying to ensure that revivification crystal stays on the battlefield. And you can see we actually have these Saurus Scar veterans trying to get involved, I think, against the companions of Kinel here, and at the same time, Alberic decides to dive in against Lord Mazdamundi, hoping to take care of Lizardman leadership, as we have these foot squires and these peasant mob diving in for rear charges into some of these Saurus Scar veterans and these temple guards as well, holding them in place, while the paladin, again, trying to get some damage, I think, with his anti-large capabilities into Lord Mazdamundi. While back here you can see the Cold One Spear Riders being dragged into the conflict as the companions of Kinel get that charge in. We've got these questing knights pushing in as well, I think hoping to shut down this unit, maybe help cause those mass routes and maybe just come out on top in that engagement before the Lizardman cavalry is able to move as it pleases. In the center here, meanwhile, you can see we've got that rampaging continuing amidst these Saurus warriors on the left and on the right, but the peasant mob not having a good time either, as he Bastildon with Revivification Crystal turning around and diving into them. We have Alberic here as well, trying to get away from the Saurus Scar veteran, while the Saurus Scar veteran then turns around and gets a nice rear charge into the peasant mob over here. Meanwhile, we've got the questing knight pushing in, trying to maybe pin the Saurus Scar veteran in place, getting a nice rear charge into the temple guards, but again, the temple guards are anti-large and armor piercing, so they're a very dangerous unit to go in against. But all of these peasant bowmen in the distance, meanwhile, continue to fire away into now, I think, the Saurus Scar veteran perhaps, trying to get some damage into these very threatening anti-large armor piercing units, but in comes Harmonic Convergence, keeping them doing significantly better in melee than they otherwise would, and also popping the Revivification Crystal on this Saurus Scar veteran, keeping him alive and fighting, keeping that Carnosaur alive and fighting as well. In comes some Earthblood to try and keep these Bretonnian units alive and fighting as well. We get another charge in from these questing knights, popping into these temple guards, I think hoping to cause a fair bit of damage and morale damage as well, while back here you can see the Cold One Spear Riders have been taken care of. Now Alberic is looking for an opportunity to dive in, I think, to these Saurus warriors, and again, just systematically reduce the enemy numbers here so that Bretonnia has the numerical advantage and is able to continue to sort of systematically diminish and destroy the Lizardman forces. You can see on that right flank that is happening. The skink cohort giving up on the fight finally, though they were able to hold down 2 units of peasant mob and these foot squires for a very long time. So good use of the skink cohort there as a fodder unit, but now these peasant mobs and the foot squires are going to be able to dive in for this envelopment and get some damage here as well, while the companions of Kinel and these questing knights decide to dive in themselves right into the Bastildon with the Revivification Crystal. The Temple Guard as well having a terrible time against these foot squires. We've got some of these Source Warriors as well falling apart, and all of that range support continues to pour in, I think focusing now on Lord Mazdamundi instead, who is using Apotheosis to keep himself alive. He is surrounded, he is being beaten, he is having a terrible time in melee right now, and Alberic as well now looking for an opportunity to dive in somewhere, while all of these questing knights and the companions of Kinel pull back into safety. You can see the Lizardmen are actually being rather badly bruised and beaten over here. It would have been a great idea to send some of these large units back into these back lines and shut down some of these peasant bowmen. As you can see, the attempt was made on this left flank over here as this skink cohort that decided to rally is being sent in against the peasant bowmen here, but now they're just pinned down by some more peasant mob. If one of these Saurus Scar veterans, or perhaps the Bastildon with Revivification Crystal, was sent charging through some of these peasant bowmen and then chasing after the others, you can rest assured a lot of the damage that these archers are causing, well, it wouldn't have been there because these bowmen would have been taken care of a long time ago. But instead, you can see we've got Lord Mazdamundi down to about 25% health. We've got the Bastildon down to about 50%, the Saurus Scar veterans as well, both of them down to about 50%. And meanwhile, as we have these peasant mobs and the foot squires diving in for that envelopment that I mentioned earlier, you can see we have another use of banishment going down, trying to take care of this massive clump. So great awareness there, great use of Lord Mazdamundi's abilities there, and you can see he's very low on health, so now is the time to use his abilities. Shield of the Old Ones goes in as well to try and keep the friendlies safe from the magical damage, and the Ruination of Cities popping in as well, hoping to just completely destroy this Bretonnian clump. And beautiful work over here as the Ruination of Cities, of course, it is randomized directions, but it is well placed as well, moving in and absolutely obliterating some of these Bretonnian units. You can see the foot squires not having a good time, these questing knights not having a good time, the peasant mob, of course, not having a good time at all, and even the companions of Kinel being absolutely shut down by the ruination of cities there. Beautifully done, but you can see Lord Mazdamundi as well. He may have bitten off more than he could chew. He does use cold-blooded to try and stay alive, but that does slow him down, allowing Alberic de Bordelot to take a bite out of Lord Mazdamundi, and he does have to evacuate the premises. Beautifully done there. Lizardman leadership has been dropped, and you can see around the field, despite that, it is the Bretonnians that are largely giving up because of the ruination of cities and banishment combo that went down in that center spot there. We've got a lot of terror kicking in. We've got a lot of peasants giving up, of course, and you can see as well we have the revivification crystal going down on the Saurus Scar veteran here, trying to keep him alive despite him being under all of that ranged fire. And you can see Alberic as well looking for an opportunity to dive in and get a nice rear charge perhaps into the Saurus Scar veteran, but he does need to pull away into safety as quickly as possible because you can see each strike causes so much damage to Alberic, and he is at his hit point regeneration cap as well, so he's not going to get any more than 50% hit points, so he does need to pull back into safety. You can see the Saurus Scar veterans immediately turning around and focusing in on him. He decides to turn around wisely and decides to pull up into the air. Great call there. He's down to just under 50% health now, but you can see this Saurus Scar veteran being fired upon by those peasant bowmen, doing a lot of damage here, and the damsel now as well, baiting these Saurus Scar veterans, trying to get that damsel taken care of. Very Jurassic Park over here. All she needs is a flare, just pulling these dinosaurs away off to the side there. Meanwhile, you can see we have a lot of Bretonnian forces rallying, willing to fight once more, and the peasant bowmen actually completely out of ammunition, now pushing forward as well, hoping to get involved in melee, and here they actually managed to scare off these King cohort who they greatly outnumbered. So beautiful use of the peasant bowmen here. It is a peasant type of day, it seems, and over here you can see as well we've got these beast slayers of Baston pushing forward, chasing after these Saurus Scar veterans, but the Saurus Scar veterans turn around, dive right into these foot squires with their halberds, not really bothered by those halberds, I think, but Alberic again looking for an opportunity to get involved. A nice charge over here can cause a fair bit of damage, decides to dive right into the Saurus Scar veteran over here, gets a touch of hurt done, causes terror amidst these Saurus warriors who are being assisted by the revivification crystal, but now Alberic once more needs to pull away into safety. He is down to about 25% health. Both Saurus Scar veterans are over here, and he decides to, wisely so once more, pull away and take to the air. We've got the foot squires diving in now, we've got the peasant bowmen as well willing to dive in, we've got the damsel using earthblood to keep all of these peasants and knights and foot squires alive, and Alberic once more looking for an opportunity to dive in somewhere, anywhere where he can cause some damage. Maybe into these Cold One Spear Riders, maybe into this Bastillodon over here. Great charge in there. The Carnosaurs immediately respond. They turn around, and Alberic as well responds himself, decides to turn around and take to the air. We've got these Cold One Spear Riders as well chasing after Alberic, and he is finding himself in a bit of a trouble spot right now. Health is dropping. We've got the Carnosaurs coming in, and Alberic now has maybe bitten off more than he can chew, and the Carnosaurs make sure that Alberic falls as well. So now the Bretonnians have lost their leadership, and as you can see across the field, though the Lizardmen are rather disparate and in a terrible situation, the Bretonnians aren't all that well off either. All they have are the peasant mobs, some peasant bowmen, and some foot squires. Maybe these beast lords of Baston can cause some trouble. Maybe the Damsel of Life can provide enough support to actually help the Bretonnians come out on top, because these foot squires as well in a terrible situation. You can see the Saurus Scar veteran here routing and being chased off by the Damsel, and the Damsel in turn being chased by this Saurus Scar veteran. Great use of the Damsel over here. That Saurus Scar veteran at this point in time can be driven off the field completely, and that needs to happen if the Bretonnians are going to stand any chance. Meanwhile, over here you can see these Saurus warriors with shields willing to fight once more, pushing in after the Damsel as well, but you can see these peasants just trying to swarm these Saurus warriors here, and ultimately the Saurus warriors give up on the fight, completely shatter, while off in the distance these foot squires taking care of those temple guards off in the distance there, able to then turn around and chase after perhaps these Saurus warriors as well. But you can see this peasant clump and these foot squires as well chasing after the Saurus Scar veteran, while this one does get driven off the field. Beautifully done by the Damsel. Now the Damsel turns around while the Saurus Scar veteran continues to give chase. That Damsel needs to be very careful, because of course that Saurus Scar veteran will take care of her in an instant. She does manage to dodge for now, though, and pulls back to try and provide some support to the peasant clump over here. We've got these peasant bowmen as well joining in on the fun. And we're going to kick it up a notch over here, because right now is a time of some maneuvering, because the Saurus Scar veteran has to be very careful as to where he gets involved, of course. And that's a very wise decision to pop Foe Seeker over here, get some of that extra speed, get that vigor buff as well, and just try and regroup and maybe push into some of these foot squires instead of diving into this massive clump of peasants. And you can see momentarily being distracted by the Damsel over there, but the Damsel very quick to respond, pulls away, makes enough of a distance that the Sword Scar veteran realizes he does not stand a chance there, and instead once more goes chasing after these foot squires. And we've got some of these Saurus warriors as well willing to dive in. So good call again, trying to systematically dismantle the Bretonnian forces. In goes the Carnosaur, throwing these foot squires back, but the damsel dives in once more, trying to pull a Jurassic Park off over here, once more trying to distract, I think, the Saurus Scar veteran. But the Saurus Scar veteran has Deadly Onslaught active, has Foe Seeker active, and is wanting to completely destroy these foot squires, rather wisely so. And once they begin to rout, the Saurus Scar veteran goes chasing after the Damsel of Life, ultimately decides that maybe it's not worth it, pulls back around, sees these peasant bowmen that are pushing in, and these peasant bowmen decide to maybe turn around, maybe going for the charge. And honestly, the lady bless these peasant bowmen's hearts as they try to dive in on a giant Carnosaur that will rip them to shreds. In he goes with a beautiful charge, tossing these peasants back, causing a great deal of damage, not only to health, but also to morale. And now that Carnosaur is just judging the situation and gets his tail to just slam down on these peasants. Beautiful work there by that Carnosaur, beautiful work there by that Saurus Scar veteran. Immediately, these peasant bowmen are made to rout out of fear and terror. They're giving up on the fight, and you can see the Saurus Scar veteran here looking for the next viable target, seeing these peasant bowmen that are trying to close the gap for some reason. Again, the lady bless their heart. In comes the Carnosaur with another beautiful charge over here, ripping them to shreds. Some of them are trying to dive into the Carnosaur. The Carnosaur does not care. These peasants are just mosquitoes to this giant dinosaur, and you can see a lot of damage being done there once more to health and to morale. These peasant bowmen might give up on the fight immediately as well, but we've got the Beastlers of Baston closing the gap with their anti-large capabilities. The Damsel of Life here tempting fate a little bit. Now she's getting chased, manages to dodge the Saurus Scar veteran, but we have these Temple Guard now willing to return to the fight as well. And the Carnosaur here needs to be very careful, or rather the Saurus Scar veteran needs to be very careful, decides to dive right through the Beast Slayers of Baston. And you can see we actually get Earthblood activated on some of these peasant bowmen back here, trying to keep them alive rather than some of these anti-large Beast Slayers. But you can see the Temple Guard here giving up on the fight, completely shattered and leaving the field, while over here the Damsel is in trouble. As you can see, the Carnosaur now focusing in on that Damsel. She is being terrified. She's going to give up on the fight. She's down to about 50% health. She decides to rout, and we have this peasant clump still chasing after the Saurus Scar veteran here, hoping to pin him in place. This is a Damsel, needs to be kept alive. Even if she routes all the way to the edge of the field and then rallies, that will make a huge difference. While you can see over here the Saurus Scar veteran here going 1 versus 347, trying to come out on top, of course, causing a lot of fear and terror over here, scaring off these peasant bowmen, scaring off these Beast Slayers of Baston. They do not stand a chance against this massive beast over here, using Foe Seeker to keep vigor and speed up, now trying to take care of these foot squires, and again, pushing through those foot squires rather wisely, chasing after some of these routing units, trying to get them all to leave the field. And you can see the Damsel of Life as well, very close to the edge of the field. This is a terrifying situation for the Bretonnians, of course, and I think the Carnosaur, knowing that, wants to push in, ultimately decides to turn around and get involved against these foot squires, which is actually a bad call. The foot squires are at least armor piercing, so not the ideal spot for the Saurus Scar veteran, despite using Deadly Onslaught to come out on top. And you can see off in the distance the Damsel does decide to rally, and so too do these peasant bowmen over here, these foot squires over here as well. And that's the problem with delaying the chase, delaying the hunt. In comes some Earthblood as well, trying to keep these foot squires and peasant bowmen alive. The Carnosaur finds himself, or rather the Saurus Scar veteran finds himself in a bit of a trouble situation as he is being surrounded. His morale is dropping, so he decides to pull away into safety, again, quite wisely. He wants to turn around and get another charge in there, because again, when you charge, you get a bit of a morale buff. I believe it's plus 15 if the numbers are still the same, if I recall correctly. So he's trying to get that morale buff, trying to stay in the fight and trying to get rid of these peasant bowmen once more. Great call, diving through. Look at that bloodshed, just trying to destroy these peasants' lives. They're not going back to tend to their farms or families. Great work by the Carnosaur, great work by the Saurus Scar veteran, but you can see once more the Carnosaur is being completely surrounded, the Damsel getting involved as well. The Carnosaur not having the best of times here. All of these peasants just poking and prodding, just irritating that Saurus Scar veteran, irritating that Carnosaur, ultimately forcing him to give up on the fight and giving the Bretonnians a Pyrrhic victory. Honestly, every time I reviewed this battle for Total Breakdown, I really wasn't sure if the result would somehow be different. I mean, not actually, but it certainly felt that close. In many ways, this was the day of the peasant, as the peasant mobs were able to really help bog down enemy advances and even take out some skinks here and there, allowing an early advantage. Further down the line, the peasant bowmen were causing a lot of damage, and even though their kill counts are really low, don't underestimate just how much damage they did to the giant dinosaurs, damage that ultimately led to their demise. The Lizardmen should have sent one of their large beasts out to chase down some of the archers early on. That may have made enough of a difference to really turn the momentum on the battlefield. A very impressive fight put up by the Lizardmen at the end there, trying to claw back a victory. but unfortunately, life did not find a way, and Bretonnia took the day. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War content and keep sending in those battle replays. I do think it's one of the best ways to learn, and it's always nice to highlight such great battles from the community. I'd also like to give a massive thanks to my patrons for supporting the channel on a month-to-month basis, keeping the channel alive and running smoothly. It makes a massive difference, and thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you on the battlefield.